All right, welcome to our live taping of the 4 and 3 podcast. Dan here, Trey there from Faithwire and CBN. Man, we got some doozies today. I'm fired up because these fact checkers have got me all just, man, these. Don't ever trust these fact checkers. I'm just saying. Do all your research. We're going to have two great examples of this for you here in just a minute of just how you can't trust. You got to go to the source. You got to go to the source and make your own call because everybody's got a grift these days. So sorry, Trey, you're walking into a firestorm here. I'm all fired up.
I know. Well, I think it's just like the frustration, I think, for a lot of people, particularly conservative people, is there's so much nuance that's allowed and so much grace that's extended to one side when we address these issues, and it doesn't go the other way. So I know we'll get into it in the podcast, but it is frustrating.
Yeah. And so what you're watching here, by the way, is a live recording of our podcast, which we're going to post on iTunes, right after we're done taping. So not this part. This is the extra part. So
yes.
So here we go. We're going to tape. I got to hit record, though. I know I'm going to forget to do that one of these days. And then anyway. All right. Here we go. Stand by.
Faithwire.com.
Hello and welcome to 4 and 3, a podcast breaking down 4 of the most important stories of the day and 3 things you need to know about them, all from a Christian perspective. Today's Tuesday, May 25th, 2021. I'm Dan Andros. Coming up on the podcast today, calls for investigation into the COVID origins widen. We'll have the details there. Also, Saturday Night Live hits record low ratings after their poignant finale. I don't know about you. I don't know if I want poignancy in my comedy show.
Your comedy.
And then our fact checkers to be trusted. We're going to fact check the fact checkers. And John Cena faces swift backlash for apologizing to China for calling Taiwan a country. These stories and more, all with Trey Goins-Phillips from Faithwire.com. Trey, how are you today, sir?
I'm good. I mean, it's just these stories. It's just been a tough couple days for Hollywood. I think with John Cena, and then SNL ratings are not too hot. And then, like you said, the fact checker story is just that one's a doozy too. So it's just going to be there's a lot going on today's podcast.
Yeah, and I got to say, I've seen a couple Hollywood people. Maybe Hollywood, they're coming out of their COVID R&R time, which I just find hilarious. I've seen so many actors and actresses going, COVID was just a time of reflection for me. I'm just like, must have been nice to just reflect in your mansion, sitting by your, running waters and ponds or whatever you got there in the backyard. And it's like everyone else was struggling to get by and frustrated that they couldn't go out. You guys, I'm glad you had some good R&R there for a year. So it's insufferable. Hollywood's insufferable as always, but all right, let's dive right in, Trey. Here we go. Story number 1. This is the intensified calls here for where did COVID come from? 3 researchers from China's Wuhan Institute of Virology became sick enough in November 2019 that they sought hospital care, according to a previously undisclosed U.S. intelligence report that now adds weight to people calling for a fuller probe into what happened here. It's almost like China wasn't honest from the front. And it's very possible now, once a theory that was dismissed, that COVID-19 may have escaped from a laboratory in Wuhan. The State Department fact sheet, which was issued in the final days of the Trump administration, which said that several researchers at the lab, which was a center for the study of coronaviruses and other pathogens, they became sick in autumn of 2019, quote, with symptoms consistent with both COVID-19 and common seasonal illnesses. Now, the number of researchers, the timing of their illnesses, and their hospital visits come on the eve of a meeting with the World Health Organization's decision-making body, which is expected to discuss the next phase of COVID-19's origins. So, the information that we had, this is from the Washington Post here, the information that we had coming from the various sources was of exquisite quality. It was very precise. What it didn't tell you was exactly why they got sick. So the Wuhan Institute, by the way, they haven't shared any of the raw data, the safety logs, and lab records on their work with coronaviruses in bats, which is where they say that it came from. And they say we continue to have serious questions about the earliest days of the COVID-19 pandemic, including its origins with the People's Republic of China, said a spokesperson for the National Security Council. Ironically, China has also said that the virus, their defense to all this in response, remember, they said that maybe it didn't start in China at all, and they claimed that a military base in Maryland might have been the source of the outbreak. And there's absolutely zero evidence for that. So this should give you some indication of what we're dealing here with China. China's other deflection was, they got sick because they got the flu. But David Asher, who's a former State Department official, debunked that idea, saying, I'm very doubtful that 3 people in a highly protected circumstances in a level 3 laboratory working on coronaviruses would all get sick with influenza that put them in the hospital or in severe conditions all in the same week, and it didn't have anything to do with coronavirus, he said, adding that the researchers' illnesses may represent the, quote, first known cluster of COVID-19 cases. So that's the sheet. And then what's the left saying on this? Well, this soundbite from CNN pretty much sums up the backtracking on this issue that's happening on the left right now. Take a listen to this clip from CNN.
This matters. Understanding where coronavirus and how the pandemic began matters. A lot of the discussion about the lab leak, I think, was clouded early on because there was the suggestion by some that it was somehow a Chinese weapon that caused this. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a lab accident. But we've come a long way from people dismissing this as a conspiracy theory to a lot of people taking this seriously, Maggie.
So they go on to discuss it. But the problem with that assessment is that the Trump administration talked about a lab leak, not specifying that it was intentional. Well, we covered on this podcast the Drew Holden thread from last week that highlighted so many examples of the press dismissing the lab leak theory. And they weren't dismissing it because they said it was a weapon. They were dismissing it because they said that it wasn't leaked from a lab and that it came from bats. Here's a clip from the New York Times to give you an example of what the type of reporting was back then. So the Trump administration promoted the unsubstantiated, this is New York Times, the Trump administration promoted the unsubstantiated theory that the virus might have leaked from a government-run laboratory in China. But many senior American officials have said in private that evidence pointing to a lab accident is mainly circumstantial. So there you have the New York Times. There's a zillion examples like this. This idea that CNN is promoting here that Trump was just saying it was a weapon, and the Trump administration was saying China used it as a weapon. That was crazy talk. But this lab leak theory, we're taking this. No, they did not take it seriously at that time. They said it came from bats. They accused Trump of being racist by saying it was from Wuhan. All the rest. So they're very much gaslighting the history right now. So you gotta sift through the internet and go through this stuff and find it, but it's there. So what's the right saying? Well, Tucker Carlson pointed out that the government of Thailand contacted the CDC and Tony Fauci's office to say that its intel had picked up biological anomalies around the lab in Wuhan on November 19th, 2019, which is around the time that the Chinese researchers at the lab became sick. Mark Meadows said Donald Trump told the world last year that COVID started in a Wuhan lab. He cut off funding to the same Wuhan lab over Fauci objections and left the WHO over their pro-China bias. Now Joe Biden wants an independent investigation by the same WHO. So he's give me a break. So why does it matter? Well, Trey, I think it matters here for a whole bunch of reasons, but it's self-evident. We need to know where this virus originated from. There's a whole number of reasons. We could hold China accountable. Clearly, they are not. You can't trust them to tell the truth. These are the same people that are rounding up Christians and Muslims, putting them in re-education camps and thought camps, to indoctrinate them on, communist government. So you look back at how the press dismissed this clearly because of their anti-Trump bias. They just couldn't accept that maybe he was correct, and so they sided with China over this and just went with the bat thing, even though there was no evidence for that either. So we don't know where it came from, but the point is the press just dismissed one of these theories out of hand just because Trump promoted it.
Yeah, and I think it's funny, like when listening to that clip of John Berman over at CNN
Yeah.
saying, "Oh, we've come a long way, and like we've just kind of evolved on this issue, and now culturally we're okay with talking about the possibility that it could maybe have come from a Wuhan lab." And it kind of makes me, it's like, so the media will peddle an idea or a perspective on something, like they're putting gas on this cycle. And then the cycle starts to spin, and then they will analyze it as if the cycle was born completely outside of them. It's like,
Right.
I mean, no, it's like you created this narrative, you
Right.
gave it gas, you fueled it, you put it out into the culture, and then you can't act as if it's something that happened separate
Right.
and apart from
Right.
you.
Yeah. It's your job at the time when we're dealing with, hey, where did this thing come from? It's your job at the time to explore all the ideas. They clearly didn't do that. They just picked the narrative they like better and went with it. I mean, everyone that, had a brain and thinks for themselves realized that maybe like we can't trust China. I mean, who didn't think that at that time? But so you had to keep all options open as to where this thing came from. They didn't do that. And then now that you're right, now they look back on it and go, "Oh wow, this is an interesting idea." Like, come on, it's silly.
Yeah. And it's also frustrating too to listen to. I know that I have complained plenty of times about Dr. Fauci, but it's frustrating to me that now Fauci is completely on board with the idea of potentially it came from a lab, when literally 2 weeks ago the idea was just absolutely unacceptable to him
And racist and everything else.
Yeah, just an awful idea, absolutely completely baseless as far as reality is concerned. But now, just a mere 2-3 weeks later, he's on board. So my thought is just, if you don't like what Fauci is saying today, he will have an entirely new perspective in 1 to 2 weeks.
So hang in there. Just hang in there. Maybe you'll like his next one.
Right, so just buckle in, and it will change.
Yeah, good.
All right, here, on to the next story.
Yeah, let's
go. So ratings for the season finale of SNL over the weekend were less than impressive. So the show featured a prominent performance by Lil Nas X, the rapper whose song "Call Me by Your Name" showed him in the music video descending into what was, depicted to be hell, and he then danced on Satan's lap. So if you remember, he promoted the song by releasing 666 retrofitted Nike shoes with a pentagram and real drops of human blood in the soles. So that's just a little picture of what that performance was all about. So as for SNL, only 3.5% of households watched the show live or on the same day, Saturday, and only 1.5% of adults in the coveted 18 to 49-year-old demographic watched it. And those numbers are tied with the week before for the lowest rating of the entire season this year. So 2 weeks ago, much to the chagrin of many on the left, Tesla and SpaceX founder Elon Musk hosted SNL, granting the show its third highest rating of the season, with 4.8% of households watching and 2.7% of 18 to 49-year-olds watching. So that's how far it fell in just a matter of 2 weeks. So what's the left saying? Well, like I said, many on the left were angry when Musk hosted SNL because he's been outspoken in his opposition to COVID lockdowns, and frankly, just because he's wealthy. Even a handful of SNL cast members were angry that he was coming. Cosmo published an article ahead of Musk's performance saying that, quote, "no one is thrilled," and fans have, quote, expressed their disappointment at the choice by SNL to host Musk. The ratings, however, proved that people were thrilled and that people were not disappointed with Musk hosting it. So some were also angry when Dave Chappelle earlier in the season hosted the show because of some of his past jokes, particularly on LGBT topics. And others on the left were angry too when SNL regular cast member Michael Che, who is black, poked fun at a popular internet slang often attributed to Generation Z. He was condemned for appropriating what some claim is African American vernacular English, and they said that it shouldn't be made fun of by comedians. So a lot of the left is just kind of pretty angry generally with the choices SNL has made recently. So what's the right saying? Well, conservatives or for conservatives, there's not really much love lost with Hollywood. It's increasingly progressive and out of touch with the right and even with moderate Americans. Even Chappelle admitted there's a problem. In this day and age, he said recently, quote, "No one can be woke enough for Hollywood."
Yeah.
So, why does it matter? I think we've watched, Dan, over the last several months, the kind of ending of the Hollywood royalty, that era. There are plenty of people still invested, of course, but as a whole, I just don't get the impression that Americans care too much about what celebrities think, say, or do. I remember at the beginning of the lockdowns, and we talked about this at the beginning of the podcast, like so many multimillionaire, billionaire celebrities posting on social media about how easy it is to quarantine and just stay at home. But I think for most people, it's just super tone deaf.
Yeah.
We watch these really wealthy celebrities in their luxurious houses, in their pools, golf courses, whatever, telling us and lecturing us about how important it is to just stay home and not work, and how easy it is to reflect on all we have. And it didn't sit well with people, I don't think, on either side of the aisle. And then here's the thing about SNL. Our entertainment and media world has become so obsessed with like the political grandstanding and political correctness and wokeness that there's no room left for levity or comedy anymore at all. And it's just not funny. So why invest in this stuff?
No, it's not. I mean, Piper barking in the background's funnier than half the stuff SNL does right now. Trey's dog Piper there making another appearance. But yeah, I mean, they've just lost the ability to be fun. Like, you could poke fun at this stuff and it would be more tolerable if everyone was a target. But that's just not the way it works. They don't poke fun at the left. They just poke fun at the right. So what they've done is they've segregated themselves and they've decided, like, we're going to be a Democratic operative comedy show. It'll be funny to all the people who hate Republicans, and they'll laugh at the red meat jokes about how bad Republicans are. But then you're just going to alienate the other half. They're not going to watch it. Like, I can sit through, jabs at Republicans and conservatives and Christians, etc., when I know they're going to jab at everybody else. Because then everyone's just kind of getting, it's the funny things about culture. And honestly, like, even the old day SNLs, they would do some of that, but it was more just funny. I mean, in a van down by the river, a motivational speaker, like that's just funny. They've just lost that ability now. I mean, when I saw this at SNL's ratings, no, they didn't say the ratings. It was just like a headline on CNN or something that said Saturday Night Live's poignant finale. And I'm just like, I don't want to see what is a poignant comedy show? When you say poignant, I'm thinking of like some deep, issue, or somebody, is making a great speech just at a really controversial issue or something. Not a comedy show. Come on.
Yeah, so many of these comedians just nowadays take themselves so seriously that it's just that they want to use their platform to preach. I mean, we've seen that with Jimmy Kimmel and with Stephen Colbert, and even some with Jimmy Fallon. It's like, do you not realize that your job, the thing that people like about you, is that you separate us from our everyday reality?
Yeah.
You give people a break and you give them an opportunity to laugh. And there's just nothing funny about our entertainment world these days, because everything is so sliced and diced to make sure that it's not offending the groups that Hollywood doesn't want to offend. That it's just, I don't know. It's it's so robotic now. It's like it's been focus grouped to death, and there's nothing fun about it.
I'm wondering when Hollywood is going to realize that it's no longer the hip and edgy thing to just be a liberal. Right? Like I'm just wondering when someone's going to realize, you know what, coming out and like repeating Democratic talking points isn't the cool thing anymore. That's just the easy thing to do. You're going to, hey, everyone's going to celebrate. Oh my gosh, surprise, another liberal in Hollywood. If you come out as, as a open with your faith, maybe you're supported, conservative values, something that would be controversial. That would be brave, but they're not going to do it because that's not the, it's that's not the easy way. They'd rather take the easy way and get the easy cheers amongst their peers. So
and I think too that's not where the money is. Like, we see people who are willing to do that. When they do that, they end up being blacklisted.
So it's job. They can't.
Right now, there's just not the incentive.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, let us head into story number 3 here, and fact checking the fact checkers. You've likely probably seen A lot of independent fact-checking labels slapped on various articles on social media recently, in the last couple years, I guess. But are these fact-checkers really independent? Are they really trustworthy? Outlets like PolitiFact popularized the fact-check. Now a lot of the bigger, publications, USA Today, AFP, all the rest, they have their own sort of fact-checking divisions. And so, we looked into I've been following PolitiFact for a long time when they came on the scene, because they used to do all these fact checks on shows that I worked on. And it was always interesting to me, the spin that they would put on things, just the editorial decisions and what they chose to cover and what they chose not to cover. But I'll give you an example of a recent one. It was a fact check by PolitiFact surrounding the January 6th Capitol riots. They were responding to a meme on Facebook, which they linked to. So it's the specific meme. And here is their headline. It says, Facebook post says left-wing activist John Sullivan incited the insurgents of the U.S. Capitol. They rated it mostly false. Now, they don't have a picture of the meme on there. They just linked to it. So I went and looked at the actual meme. And so here's what the meme says. And this is important because this is what they do. And you're going to have to look at this on other things that they do, that they rate, because they're tricky. So the claim on the actual Facebook meme says, anti-Trump founder of radical left-wing group Insurgents USA, John Sullivan, incited insurgents of U.S. Capitol. Okay? So here's the facts. Sullivan is anti-Trump, so that part's correct. He did found Insurgents USA, which if you look into that, which I did, it is radically left-wing. That's correct. He is on camera inciting violence while in the U.S. Capitol building, shouting, "Let's burn this expletive down. We did this expletive together," and so on. And so the base level things in the meme are all 100% correct. There is no disputing them. Yet the claim was rated mostly false. How did they get there? Well, let's look at how they shift the goalposts here. They say, quote, "There's no evidence that he incited the violence himself or led the charge into the Capitol." That's not what it says. That's not what the meme says. The meme that went viral says he incited it, which he did clearly on camera. They didn't say he did it by himself or that he was the ringleader of it all. It's not what it claimed. Another part of it said that Sullivan, the guy, denied any affiliation with Antifa, although he has posted related hashtags on Twitter. Again, the original meme doesn't even mention Antifa. Antifa's not even part of it. So why are they debunking that part of it? It's not even in the original thing that they're looking at. And then they rate it mostly false. So that just gives you an idea. Something that's 100% true gets a mostly false rating. That's also an indication. When you see mostly false, it's probably true. But keep that backdrop in mind. And the AFP and Twitter and Facebook are now out in force saying that no, Black Lives Matter did not voice support for Hamas. This was a recent fact check that they did. Here's what BLM tweeted. In the midst of Hamas raining down rockets on Israel. So that's the backdrop there. They wrote, "Black Lives Matter stands in solidarity with Palestinians. We are a movement committed to ending settler colonialism in all forms and will continue to advocate for Palestinian liberation and always have, always will be. Free Palestine." Faithwire and CBN's headline there that received this AFP fact check, which you can see the false information label there on the screenshot. Our headline said, "Black Lives Matter effectively pledges solidarity with Hamas." Now, just a couple facts to consider with that headline. Hamas was elected by Palestinians. Palestinians elected Hamas as their representative government. Hamas is currently firing rockets at Israel. The clear implication to BLM's tweet, and why we wrote effectively, because they didn't directly say Hamas, is that they are supporting this action. If they didn't, then they should indicate that they don't agree with Hamas and what they're doing. They're the ones that should have to clarify that. But the media and these fact checkers have leapt into action here to go ahead and do their defense for them. Let's see here. Let me skip down here. Oh, and by contrast, this is where I wanted to go next with it. By contrast, when President Trump denounced white supremacists after Charlottesville. Remember this. The press used his very fine people on both sides line to claim that he was supporting white supremacy and then giving them power, and everyone said he was a white supremacist because of that, even though he denounced them in the very next sentence. In that same clip that they pull, he said that he specifically said he denounces white supremacy. So why is the standard, that same standard, not applied to Black Lives Matter? Why do the fact checkers go out in force and do their spin for them? And these are questions that people should be asking about their press, because it's clearly a one-sided media right now. And what's the left saying on this particular issue? Well, they've created quite an echo chamber of influence, and they have the press. Think about this. They have the press. They have the social media giants. They have Democrats creating a narrative. The media spins it for them. The fact checkers verify their narrative. And social media giants then validate the fact checkers. And then it just goes on around and around. It's a vicious circle. What's the right saying? Well, the right's been complaining about this double standard for some time now. But it just seems like it's going to be one of those mountains that might be just too high to climb. And so why does it matter, Trey? I mean, it just matters because truth matters. And we've talked about this ad nauseum on this podcast. You know, we're all going to have our own little biases, unintentional at times, and how we see the world. We have to be honest about those things, and we have to look at issues as best we can. But the media has turned more and more into a spin zone now than ever before. And look, we just need to pray for the truth to get out there, because if information doesn't matter, if truth doesn't matter, and it's just whatever headline you can get, then man, we are going to be. I mean, it's an Orwellian world standing before us.
Yeah, and you can even tell with just the way things are written, the way headlines are written. When a Republican comes out in opposition to something, it's always Republicans pounce.
Yeah.
And I know that's something that a lot of conservatives have made fun of, but it goes back to the assumption that the media makes, which is that if it's a conservative or a Republican doing something, the intent is somehow nefarious.
Yeah.
Like there is a wrongful or there's a malicious motivation behind what they're saying or doing. And with the left, the benefit of the doubt is always in place, sometimes even blindly, which is the case with this issue with BLM and Hamas. It's, well, since they didn't explicitly say it, it's not even on the table as a plausible possibility. Yeah. And it's wrong to even suggest it. So like you said, we're going to carry the water for them. We're going to give them a defense that puts them in a good light. We're going to extend an unreasonable amount of grace to them that we would never extend to a conservative. And I just happen to think with the January 6th meme that you talked about, like, so the Facebook's thing is like, well, it's not true because he didn't lead the charge physically.
Right.
I don't remember Donald Trump either physically leading the charge so because he didn't lead the charge, he's not guilty of inciting violence. I guess by that definition, Donald Trump would also not be guilty of inciting violence.
Yeah. I mean,
so it's just the double standard to me is so obvious that it's like, it makes your head spin.
Yeah, it does. I mean, and that's why you have to, because they put word vomit out there, and then because they just want the mostly false label, because they know 90% of people, 95, 99% of people are just not going to read it. But I mean, the guy's on tape saying, burn it down. We did this together. And somehow he gets a mostly false label on inciting violence. I mean, that's insane. Like, that's just, that's 2 + 2 is 5 type stuff. I can see it with my eyes, and they tell me that's not what it is. It's just, and then that's the fact checker. And then they're the verified fact checkers for all these media giants. That's the world we're living in. And that's what I'm saying is we can't sit here, and when you're trying to get to the truth of an issue on social media, you can't even look at you've got to go to do your own homework and run it to ground and read up and look at as much source material as possible, because everyone's spinning things and it's out of control.
Yeah, and I think as Christians, we need to push back against that, maybe our own sinful inclination to jump to outrage and to being angry. And like you said, really investigate the facts and don't just accept whatever a fact checker says or whatever the Washington Post headline is, or whatever. Regardless of whether it's from a conservative outlet or a progressive outlet, try to dig in as best you can and try to look at it with a measured head and with a a calm attitude, because the outrage on either side is just, it's not helpful for anybody.
No, it's not. Absolutely.
So, all right, story number 4. So 2 weeks ago, actor John Cena made a big mistake. Or at least he, China, and Hollywood thought it was a mistake. So he announced in a promotional video that Taiwan would be the first country. That's important. It'd be the first country where people could see the latest Fast and Furious movie. You know, there are 9 of those movies now, by the way, Fast and Furious.
Jeez.
I don't know how they just keep making them.
How did that happen? I know.
So anyway, this week Cena released a minute-long video apologizing to Communist China, which does not recognize Taiwan as an autonomous country and uses military pressure to bully and intimidate it. China claims Taiwan is part of its territory. So Cena, who learned Mandarin to promote Fast and Furious 9, said this in his video to China: "I made one mistake. I have to say something very, very, very important now. I love and respect China and Chinese people. I'm very, very sorry about my mistake. I apologize. I apologize. I am very sorry. You must understand that I really love, really respect China and the Chinese people. My apologies." So what's the left saying? Well, the entertainment complex, big tech companies, Hollywood, they've all been pretty conveniently silent on this issue as a whole. It's usually kind of the elephant in the room that's ignored regarding China. So what's the right saying? Well, Cena was called out by a whole host of people on the right, as have a lot of Hollywood has been called out by people on the right for their silence on the atrocities happening in China. But this video in particular was condemned by a lot of people as absolutely pathetic, embarrassing, cowardly, really shameful, and, quote, not something a champion would do. Obviously, Cena is a former WWE star as well. So why does it matter? Well, I just cannot understand this. I don't know where the moral backbone is here. These same celebrities are happy and all too willing to sign up to the belief that the United States is systemically racist and an immoral nation that needs to be rebuilt from the bottom up. But you ask them about China, which is a cash cow for the entertainment industry, and they can't be bothered to condemn the genocide against Muslims, the persecution of Christians, the human rights abuses going on, or the inhumane treatment of workers, which, by the way, United States companies who are all on board with the injustice thing in the United States benefit from greatly in China. I shouldn't say just the companies. Everyday Americans, you and I, we benefit from the technology that we used was put together in sweatshops in China. Yet we don't have these big corporations calling that out or bringing attention to that issue. So it just is kind of like some of those people on the right said, it is so embarrassing that Cena feels the need to just kowtow here.
Well, and I truly believe that you're seeing a culture that is now, ever since George Floyd, I think something sort of changed. And I feel like society and culture at large have just really sort of turned into a all Democratic talking point machines. And, because why wouldn't you, if you really were for social justice and justice of all forms, then why would it be difficult for you to speak out against China like the NBA didn't do? Why would it be difficult for Disney to speak out, against China? Why would it be difficult for, Apple? And it's because they're just virtue signaling. I mean, it surely gives the impression that they're just virtue signaling. They don't really care about these issues. And you're seeing them more and more align with Democratic talking points. And then, like with the NBA in particular, they say, we want to have action and we want to make our voice count now. So go vote. And conveniently, they support all Democratic candidates. So, it's just hard to not see what's happening in the movement and culture today as just being purely political.
Yeah, and it's just the double standard is nauseating to me, because it's like Hollywood and the progressive left is all about, we want to be for the little guy, right? We're going to be the voice for the voiceless. We're going to be supporting the people who have been systemically abused, and we're going to stand up for the oppressed. And it's like, would not Taiwan fit into that category? It's a country of people who have been oppressed by the largest communist country in the world. But we have to. They set aside that moral compass when it comes to this issue because, like I said, China is, and obviously we need to coexist with China. We need to work with
Right.
China. They're a force that's there. We can't get rid of them, and I'm not saying that we
keep
should.
them honest though, because they don't.
But yes, you need to hold them morally accountable. If we're going to hold ourselves to this standard, we got to hold everybody to the same standard, or at least we should.
Yeah, and Israel as well. I mean, you've got dozens of Arab countries around them. They're the only, as you mentioned the other day, the only democratic society over there. And yet somehow everyone's always criticizing them as the big oppressor. You've got all of these outside forces coming down on them, but then they're somehow oppressing this little country the size of New Jersey. Somehow they're the ones oppressing everybody. It's really remarkable and political at the same time. And, as Christians, we've got to be praying. We've got to be patient on this. And we honestly, this is where I really lean into just trusting God's sovereignty, because I think you can get overwhelmed with it all and think, my goodness, like this is just a disaster waiting to happen. But none of this goes, God's not up there just, oh, well, they're out of control. I guess we'll just wait and see what happens. God's got things in control. Everything's, under his sovereign plan. So, I trust in that. I know we have to do our part. We've been given instructions and things and commandments that we have to do. I'll do those to the best of my ability, but I'm not gonna let this stuff overwhelm me, even though I care about it. I'm not gonna let it overwhelm me. But that's easier said than done, I think, sometimes, especially when you're going through the news of the day.
Yeah.
So,
for sure. And I don't know how someone can go through this life without trusting in God or his sovereignty, because, we can at least rest on that as believers, that God is in control.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. That is all the time we have for today. Thanks for being here. As always, we'll be back tomorrow with more news from a Christian perspective. Head on over to cbnnews.com and faithwire.com for more news from that Christian perspective. God bless you. Have a great day. We will see you tomorrow. We did it, and I loved Piper's. I loved Piper's little appearance there again today. Right at a good time too. I think she was mocking SNL. I could sense a mocking tone in the bark.
I think we were all frustrated, and she thought, I'm going to raise my voice as well.
Yeah, she was.
She felt empowered.
Yeah, so. It's great stuff. All right, gonna hop off.